This is Join Us in France, episode 456, 456. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France. Everyday life in France, great places to visit in France, French culture, history, gastronomy, and news related to travel to France. Today, I bring you a trip report with Erin Tridle. I'm calling this episode Surviving France because my guest, Erin Tridle, wrote a guide that contains a lot of sensible pieces of advice for people who are visiting France for the first time. She's been coming to France a lot. As a matter of fact, when we talked, she was about to marry a Frenchman. I'm not sure if it happened yet or not, but Erin is young. She actually has a TikTok channel. I want to bring in more young people into the show. But you know what? The good advice she shares is great at any age. So this is a great episode for people who are visiting France for the first time or those who visited a while back and perhaps forgot how things work in France. If you know a young person who's going to be visiting France soon, share this episode with them. I'm sure they'll be very happy to hear from Erin. This podcast is supported by donors and listeners who buy my tours and services, including my itinerary consult service and my GPS self-guided tours of Paris on the VoiceMap app. And you can browse all of that at my boutique, joinusinfrance.com/boutique. And if you just want to see the details about the tours and read the reviews, go to joinusinfrance.com/Annie Tours. For the magazine part of the podcast, after the interview today, I'll discuss how not to get a ticket when driving in France. You have some bad habits, North American drivers. You do. And many of you get tickets. And one of you decided that it's a conspiracy. More of that after the interview. And a quick correction. We apologize for misstating the name of Colson Whitehead in podcast episode number 455. I have corrected the transcript and the show notes. Bonjour, Erin Tridle, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie.
Wonderful to talk to you today. We want to talk because you are engaged to be married to a French person. You have visited France many times, enough times that you've written Erin Tridle's Guide to Paris. It's a good one. I like it. I like what you've done with it.
Oh, thank you.
And so we are going to go through that. And this is something you were just telling me that you do videos on TikTok as well?
Yes, I do. I make a lot of videos on TikTok that are just about Paris, places you can go, things you can see. I also talk a little bit about my long distance relationship on there. For example, one of the ones that's done well was a guide to, quote, the secret entrance of the Louvre.
Oh, the obvious? You mean the one with signs pointing you to it?
Yeah, the one with signs that no tourists know to go to because they're all like, oh, I need to line up at the pyramid. And then they wait in line for a half hour, 45 minutes, when they could have gotten in 5 minutes, you know?
I've pointed it out on the podcast. I've pointed it out on Facebook in the group. I talk about it to every person I do an itinerary with. This is not a secret. It's something that people just need to stop lining up as soon as they see a line, you know? There are other entrances.
There are other entrances and people just don't realize it. So I put it out there with the term secret because I knew secret would draw people in.
You're right.
But yeah, it ended up a lot of people did not know about it. And then a few people were like, you need to be quiet about this. Leave this line for the French people.
Yes, that sounds like well, even if all the French, even if some Americans join it, it's going to be fine because it's seriously so much faster.
It's so much faster. I think I got through in 5 minutes last time.
I know nothing about TikTok. How do people find you on TikTok?
So it's through my name. So Erin Tridle, at Erin Tridle. So yeah, you just look up my handle and you can find me there. I've got tons of videos on all kinds of things you can do and see. And it kind of covers a lot of different subjects. I have one that I did recently that was about the secret mosaic artist, the anonymous mosaic artist, I should say, in France, MMM. They have a few pieces in Paris, but they're based out of Lyon. So you can kind of see their work throughout France.
Very good. So let's talk about your list of things to make your life easier if you are visiting Paris. I mean, you've had how many trips to Paris by now, or France in general?
Oh gosh, more than I can count on one hand, because my partner is French. He lives in Paris. So I go to visit him regularly, about 2 months in the winter and 2.5 months in the summer. So I do a number of visits, usually 2 full visits each year. And then I leave a little time on the end for that, 90 days and 180-day rule, just in case I need to go to Paris for an emergency.
Yes. Okay. All right. So the first one you list is watch where you walk. I love it.
Yes. This is literally the first thing I noticed about Paris when I started going regularly, which is that, so in the United States, people tend to stick to the right side of the sidewalk. It's pretty uniform. You don't really have to zig and zag around people. In Paris, you just need to get out of the way. You need to zig and zag, and there's kind of a hierarchy of who you need to zig and zag around. I would say that, specifically the disabled and elderly, as well as families with children, it's important that you go around them if you're a person by yourself or a couple. Yep. And then also, don't be the person who forces a couple to break their hands apart to get around you. That's kind of a faux pas. Someone did that to my partner and I once, and afterwards he was like, "No, I can't believe I did that. I'm so sorry." He felt terrible. So it's just, people don't stick to the right side of the sidewalk. They kind of go everywhere. And then also, I hate to say that it's true, but it's true. There is a decent amount of poop on Parisian sidewalks. So you got to kind of, watch where you're going until you get what I refer to as the poop radar, which I swear to God is a real thing. You just start to sense it over time.
Well, also dogs tend to go in the same place. So if you walk around the same area, usually they will. Yeah,
usually you just know the spot.
You do. They develop a habit around that. Yes, that's very true. And I add one more, watch where you walk, because there are a lot of bicycles in Paris. You can't hear them. And there are also more and more electric cars in Paris, and they make a noise, but if you're not careful, you might not notice it. So watch before you step out of the curb, because people get hit by either a bicycle or a scooter or, heaven forbid, a car.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially scooters, because people are starting to take them on sidewalks rather than in the street where they're supposed to be. So definitely be careful of scooters as well.
Yeah, they're voting in Paris about possibly outlawing the rental of scooters.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, I think it might be later this month. We're recording this in March, and it's not going to be released for a long time. But by the time you hear this, it might have passed. It won't outlaw personal scooters, obviously, but it will make it illegal to rent scooters to the general public.
Which is going to make a lot of people sad.
It will. It will make a lot of people happy as well.
Yes, that is true. There is that other side.
Yes, there's that other side. All right. So your number 2 is taking up a table. Okay, tell us about that.
So I kind of have a general rule. If you're walking up to a table at a cafe or bistro and there's like a fork and knife and, like silverware settings on that table, that means they're ready for someone to eat there. If there is no silverware setting on the table, usually it's okay to take that table, as long as you're not at like a super fancy, nice restaurant, you're not at a Michelin star, it's okay to take up that table for just a Coca-Cola or an espresso and just have it be that and be on your merry way. In the United States, that is because people live off of their tips, and their tips are based on the totality of the meal in terms of price. People would be a little maybe upset or frustrated that you chose to take up a table for only, a $6 tab. Whereas it's very normal in Paris and France to do that. I've done it several times. It's just about making sure that you don't sit somewhere that is already set up for dining.
Right. On the other hand, on Sunday, I was at the Limoux, a small town, for the Carnaval. So it was an event day. There was a band playing in the distance and what have you. And some people wanted to just sit for a drink, and they got told no. Because it was just before 12. And she just says, "No, we're full. Go away."
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If there's a special event happening, expect to be ordering more. If you're sitting on the Pride Parade route in the middle of the Pride Parade, they might not want you to sit there if you're just grabbing a Coca-Cola. They'll probably want you to put in a little bit more than that.
Yes. And another question people ask is, how do I know if I can sit or not? Well, it's very, very simple. So simple that probably people don't think about it. But what you do is you walk towards the entrance and you catch the eye of one of the waiters and you just do a hand sign or something. You point to the table where you want to sit. And if they nod yes, go ahead.
Exactly. That's all. Eye contact, nods, and hand signals. Absolutely.
Yes. You don't need to go talk to them. You don't need to be looking for where's the line to get a table here. I mean, most places there is no such thing. It's just read the room. If other people are standing, waiting to talk to somebody who's going to find them a table, then do the same. Otherwise, just sit.
Yeah. And I will say, to add on to that, when you're at your table, using hand signals to get a server's attention is maybe not the way to go. That's
Correct.
maybe considered a little aggressive.
Yeah.
And I would suggest instead just making eye contact with your server and they will know to come to you. That is the way to do it. You just have to wait for their eyes to cross yours. Please do not wave for your server, all frenzied like with your hands in the air. That's really not the appropriate way to go.
And do not call them garçon.
Oh my God, no. Garçon means boy in French. It's very offensive to call someone garçon. It's very condescending.
Yeah. And I mean, they did it in American movies of the 50s and 60s. But people still think that that's what you do. No, you don't do that. Do not do that ever.
Well, also, I think in the 50s and 60s, a lot more was considered okay or appropriate than realistically ever should have been.
That as well, yes.
So if you're taking your cues from the 50s and 60s, maybe move up into the future a little bit.
Yes, move up a lot. Okay. La bise. We want to talk about la bise.
La bise. I love la bise. If honestly, like every time I see a friend of mine who's French, it's like, oh, I get to do la bise again. I know that's the lamest thing I've ever said out loud. But no, honestly, I just find it so charming. I think Americans think it's actually kissing on the cheek when really it's more like you're touching your cheek to their cheek. So, if you meet a French person, you give them a slobbery kiss on their face, they're going to be like, what's going on?
Yes.
So that's important not to do that.
Do not plant a kiss on somebody's cheek. Yeah.
Yeah, don't do it. Avoid that at all costs. But the other thing to know is that most of the time-ish, it's going to be one on one cheek and one on the other cheek, but it depends on where people come from.
Yeah.
And, there are still people who are pretty COVID conscious. So some people might not do la bise with you, especially right away upon meeting you, because maybe they're just, sticking to more or less germ-friendly ways of communication, because la bise went away for a while in COVID and people weren't doing it anymore, but it had since rebounded and come back. And now it's, again, the norm. But for a while there, it was drifting away.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's completely back, as in it's the norm. I see a lot of people where, people just nod hello, wave hello, but don't kiss, where I would have expected them before. So it's not completely back since after COVID because, health things, passing germs, whatever, we're more conscious of that. And the other thing that goes with it is that people tend to stand apart further away from each other. Like when standing in line at the grocery store or any line, it used to be like people, if you left any room between you and the person in front of you, somebody would jump in. Not anymore. That's gone. So, and bees, follow what other people are doing. If they're kissing on the cheek, do it. Otherwise, so just say hello. Bonjour. Bonjour works.
Yeah, exactly. I will say that handshakes aren't really a thing. I feel like they're very much a thing in the US. For me, handshakes are not really something that I've experienced. In France, I've mostly experienced la bise or maybe an elbow touch in COVID times. But handshakes, which are definitely the norm in the US, just really aren't as much of the thing, I think, unless you're doing some form of business.
Yes, exactly. So if you walk into your insurance broker's office, probably that person will shake your hand. But if you are just, meeting somebody, probably not a handshake. All right, here's the other one that's a biggie. Do you need to tip or not?
Okay, well, so by societal standards in France, from what I understand, you technically don't need to tip. However, me personally, I think you should always tip. But I'm also coming from an American perspective. And I'm considering the reason I also think it's important to tip, especially if you're in Paris, is that Paris is a very expensive city to live in for
True.
everyone you see living there, including the server who's maybe making minimum wage. You're there, you're getting to enjoy France and Paris and be a part of this culture and take up space and enjoy the sights and everything. And so, just because you don't have to technically tip by societal standards doesn't mean you shouldn't, because you are getting to take up a space in someone else's country, and that economy helps depend on you and other tourists and tourism in general. So bringing in that little extra bit of tips can be really important for servers, especially servers who work in a touristy area. The one thing I'll say is if you are tipping in France, if you do want to tip, you don't have to tip 20%. That is considered very generous, to the point where when I tip 20% before, someone actually asked me, "Are you sure?"
Yeah.
So it's more common to tip a few euros. If you get a €5 bill back at the end of your meal, leave the €5 bill for your server, kind of a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm French born and raised, but I lived in America for a long time. And so I got used to tipping. I don't tip as much, obviously, but I do tip a little bit most of the time. There's this place where we go every week with my husband, and we tend to leave just a little bit of tip every time. So like we round it up is the kind of thing we do. And you can do that on a credit card if you tell the person, I would like, like for the two of us, it's very often 42 euros or something. And we can just say, well, round it up to 45.
Yeah, I'll always just say, ajouter 4 euros, kind of a thing, which just means add €4 sort of a thing.
Exactly. And then what we do is at Christmas time, they do a special Christmas meal. And so that day we will give 50 or something, an extra 50, because it's Christmas. And every time she's blushing, she's, oh, you don't need. And I'm like, it's fine. It's Christmas. Merry Christmas. They work hard. They give us really good service, and we go at least once a week. So, these are people we appreciate. And so it just depends. But if you plan on going back to a cafe or something several times, just leave them a little bit of a tip and you'll see they'll serve you better. They will.
Yeah, money helps.
Yes, money helps. Yes, money helps. Yes. Taxi drivers, I never tip. I don't know why.
Taxi is kind of up to each person, sort of a thing. They don't mind if you don't tip. It's not a big deal.
If I have a heavy suitcase or something, then I will leave it, and they help me with it. I will tip. I give a little tip to Uber drivers, but you do that on the app with Uber, so it's a lot, like it's hands off. You just decide if you had a good experience or not. But yeah, Americans who think they should not tip in France because it's offensive somehow to tip, that's wrong. It is not offensive to tip. That is just BS from the crowd of people who don't want to pay. They don't want to tip. And they probably don't tip in the US either.
Well, and there are other cultures where it is considered offensive to tip. So I understand how maybe that misunderstanding has creeped over to the idea about French culture, but it's absolutely not true. Your server will definitely appreciate it if you tip.
Okay, let's talk about beggars. This is a good one because this is not something I don't think we've talked about very much on the show. So tell us what you think.
Well, so obviously my first thing is to whomever is asking you for money, just be kind. That person's going through a harder time than you are. But you also have to be on alert, especially if someone is coming up to your table while you're eating and they're asking for money, which can happen a lot, especially in Paris. So essentially, what I would say is if the person is coming up to your table, I would not suggest giving out money in that approach, simply because it actually allows for an easy getaway to take something from you. So if your phone is on the table and they ask you for money, you then look into your purse for your wallet and they take the phone and run away. If you're taking out your wallet, they may just snatch the wallet out of your hands and run.
Yeah.
So, 90% of people do not mean you harm and they just need money.
Yeah.
But in this particular approach, I do think it's smart not to get out your money. And what you can say is j'ai rien, which means I have nothing. And it's an easy phrase to remember. It's easy to pronounce, and they'll understand that you don't have any money on you.
Yeah. Yeah, and this happens to me. I mean, honestly, most of the time I don't have any coins with me. But when I go to Paris, I purposefully have coins in my pocket because there are some people who just make me sad and I want to give them a euro or two. And I also like to give, especially to the people who play in the metro when I think they're good. I mean, I'll actually stop and listen to them for a bit and then give them some money. But I'm prepared for it. I have a pocket where I put some coins so I don't have to open my purse, get stuff out, whatever.
Yeah, that's a super smart tip. Absolutely. Having like a little pouch or something for your coins specifically, so you're not taking out your full wallet.
Exactly. Very good. All right. The smokers around you. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So people, specifically, I'm talking about Americans. Americans will come to Paris and then they'll come home and they'll be like, everyone was smoking. I smelled smoke the whole time I was eating. You know, they really complain about it. And it's like, well, you know, as of COVID times, 25% of the country approximately smokes cigarettes to some degree, whether that's regularly or occasionally. I'm quoting from, I think, the New York Times article that I read during the pandemic. So that 25% might not be accurate anymore. But so a decent amount of the country smokes, and a lot of people in Paris smoke, both regularly and occasionally. So outdoor seating is going to have smoking in it nearby. That's just something you're going to encounter. So if smoke is something that really bothers you, don't eat outside. And I'm sorry, I know that that's annoying, but honestly, it's part of how things are. And when you go to another country, you need to accept how things are rather than be like, they're not the way things are in my country. You know what I mean? It's just accept it is what it is, and don't let that overshadow what should be an incredible trip to a historical place that most people on the planet want to go to.
I have a sister who does not smoke most of the time, but if she's at a cafe, she'll probably, if somebody offers her a cigarette, she'll smoke it. So it's just also, you know, like a time and place. She doesn't carry cigarettes. She doesn't buy cigarettes, but if she's in a social setting and somebody offers her a cigarette, she takes it. So there's some of that going on as well in France. It's still seen as you share a cigarette with someone. It's weird. I've never smoked in my life. I don't understand it, but this is what people do. So there you go.
Yeah, it's just part of the way things are.
Exactly. Let's talk about credit cards. This one is interesting.
Yes. So I suggest getting a contactless credit card, which I think most credit cards these days are contactless, and one with zero international fees. So for example, I have a United Airlines card through Chase Bank. And I know Capital One also has a credit card that has zero international fees. But first off, it's really important to have a contactless because it is the standard in Europe and it is the easiest way to pay. When you have to put your card into the TPO, I think it's called, the little machine that reads your card and charges you money. When you have to put your card in there, it takes a little bit longer for whatever reason than just tapping it. And so it just makes things a lot easier. And you can use your phone if your card is on your phone as well. So that way you don't have to take out your wallet every time. But so it just makes things a lot faster and a lot easier. And then also if you're putting your card in, at least know this to be true for American credit cards, you then sometimes have to provide a signature if it's over a certain amount of money. And that sometimes I have noticed will maybe annoy your server because then they have to go find a pen because they don't carry pens on them because no one has to sign for credit cards in France.
Americans are the odd ducks.
Yeah. And then the zero international fees is just kind of an obvious one, which is just that if you're going to be using your credit card throughout the trip, those international fees on certain credit cards will build up quickly. That's one way to save a lot of money is by having a card that specifically markets to the fact that it has no international fees.
Yep, definitely. And just check with your credit card provider. I don't ever pull out my wallet from my purse. I have it in my purse, but I don't pull it out because I pay with my Apple Watch.
Yeah, exactly. I have a friend who loves to pay with her Apple Watch.
You know, and occasionally somebody is very kind to me and remarks how young people normally pay with Apple Watches. And I'm like, I'm going to slap you. Because, you know, I mean, I know you mean it as a compliment, but I'm not that old, okay? Anyway, if you are worried about theft, Well, keep your wallets in zipped pockets in your purse. You don't have to pull it out. You just have your Apple Watch and you can do everything with that.
Exactly.
Let's talk about putting your phone on the table when you're having dinner.
Absolutely. So this is a big no-no.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what I like to say is it's whispering a pickpocket's name if you are putting it on the table. It is calling someone over to you to take your phone. It's very easy for someone to come by and just quietly grab your phone while you're in the midst of a conversation. There's another trick that some people do. They use a clipboard with a fake petition on it, and they'll put the clipboard on top of your phone. They'll come over to your table, put the clipboard on top of your phone, say, hey, will you sign my petition? You'll probably say no, because what are you doing signing a petition in a foreign country? And so then they'll say, okay, no problem. And they'll walk away, but they'll scoop up your phone underneath the clipboard and walk away with your phone.
Yep.
And you won't notice it for a few minutes. And by that time, that phone is long gone. It's just really important, don't hang your purse on your seat and don't put your phone on the table.
Yep. If you need to put your purse down somewhere, put your foot through the handle. Okay. So that if somebody tries to take it, you'll feel it. They won't be able to. But it's best to keep it on your lap. A few restaurants will give you a special thing where you can hang your purse. But those are usually the nicer restaurants where they are careful not to let anybody through there who might be a thief.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the 19e et 20e.
Yes, the 19th and the 20th. So some people might disagree with me on this, but this is coming from personal experience. It's also a little bit of the 10th, although I find the 10th charming and I love the canal there. But I have had some difficult experiences in the 10th, 19th, and 20th, but especially the 19th and 20th. And it's just been concerning that they seem to be concentrated in those areas. So I can go into specifics as you'd like, but essentially I've just experienced some negative experiences that made me feel unsafe in those areas. And also, once you're in the 19th and 20th, you're getting to an area where there's a lot less tourists there. So there's less people who are interested in speaking English with you. So it's just kind of a combination of things where I suggest if you're newer to Paris and you can't speak French very well or at all, maybe the 19th and 20th isn't really necessarily a place you have to go. There is Père Lachaise there, which I understand if you want to go to. It's beautiful and touching to see the tributes to people there, especially for me, Oscar Wilde's grave is absolutely incredible. It's a sculpture. So I understand if you want to go into the 20th so you can go to Père Lachaise, but just in general, unless you have something to see there, I wouldn't suggest staying in that area, and I wouldn't necessarily suggest wandering around that area.
Yeah, so occasionally somebody takes me to task on this, like, well, I've been there and it was fine. And I'm like, okay, good for you. But I know from reading news that these are areas where there are crack addicts. And guess how much a hit of crack costs in Paris?
I'm guessing not that much.
$5, €5. So anybody who looks like they might have €5 to a crack addict looks like a good target. Anybody. These people are out of their minds, okay? So just don't go there if you don't have to go there. I mean, going to Père Lachaise is completely different because I recommend people go either on the metro or on the bus.
Yeah.
You get off at Gambetta and then you walk down the hill through the Père Lachaise and then you get on the metro on the other side. That's really not, that's not a problem. But there's a lot of things going on. The police is trying to break up the groups, but it's a constant battle. I mean, we talked about people who ask you for money earlier, and it's very sad, but the problem with crack addicts is that they are not behaving like normal people. So,
yeah, no, it's concerning. The least worst thing that has happened to me in that area was I got surrounded by two men who were very clearly addicted to drugs. I can't say which one necessarily,
Sure.
but were probably a part of that camp. And they surrounded me and started screaming at me for money. I just started running. But I've had a number of things happen in that area, which just get worse as I tell them. So it's just not an area I suggest.
yeah, you don't need to go there. Just don't. There you go. And even if you find a cheap Airbnb, don't, because you'll feel unsafe. You'll come back at night one night and something untoward will happen, even if it's not dramatic. And then the next day you're like, oh my God, I don't even want to go out. If you're with your spouse or your boyfriend, then okay, that's different. But if you're by yourself, definitely don't.
Yeah, I always suggest staying in arrondissement 1 through 8 somewhere. I think those tend to be the most central, most enjoyable, and you feel pretty safe in those areas. That's my easy go-to.
Yeah, the 15th is also good. There's a bunch of them that are fine. Just avoid 10, 19, 20. It's easy. All right, let's see. Oh, walking on the grass. Yes, it's not allowed everywhere, is it?
It is not. Be careful because someone will yell at you if you are walking on grass you're not supposed to. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to go have a picnic in Paris. And they think they can do that at any park. And that's just not the case. If you try that at Luxembourg or the Tuileries, you will get yelled at.
True. Yep. In those parts, you should find a chair, which there are a lot of free chairs, or a bench, and then you're fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, also don't be that American who's like, well, I'm just going to ignore the fact that I'm supposed to go on the grass so I can take this great Instagram photo. Don't do that. Don't be that person. It's rude and it makes us look rude as tourists.
It's best to follow the rules wherever you go. Not that French people always follow the rules, but we should do that also.
Yeah. If you're looking for a picnic area, the Champ de Mars in front of the Eiffel Tower is kind of the classic one. It's really easy to do. Just to note that during the winter, the grass is blocked off to let it recover. But during the summer and the spring, it's a very accessible area that's perfect for a picnic. And if that's something you're looking to do, that's a great way to spend an afternoon in Paris.
Yeah. Yes. And also, after a heavy rain, they often close off the lawn areas because when you walk on, you just rip the grass right off. So
exactly.
Yeah, very good. You have a spidey sense about things that are overpriced. Do tell.
Yes. So I have kind of a price gauge that I go by for some key items on French menus. So, for example, 6 escargots should cost no less than €7 and no more than €13, unless they are what are called like XXL escargot, in which case they'll be a little more expensive because they're very, very large. But in general, a normal size escargot should be between 7 and 13. Anything below 7 is really low quality, and anything above 13 is that person just getting more money from you. And then a glass bottle of Coke should be between €350, which would actually be really cheap for a Coke in Paris, and at maximum €650, because €5 is about the average, but anything above €650, you're in a tourist trap or a hotel bar, period. That's what's going on there.
Yeah, Saint-Germain, I was shocked once. My husband and I, we were waiting for my sister. My sister and her boyfriend were with us, and they wanted to go antiquing. So we're on Rue du Bac, and they're stopping at all the stores. And there are a few things in life I could care more or less about than old antique stuff. I just don't know anything about them. I don't care. And I was tired. So we kept going to different bars or cafes, and my husband and I would sit and have a drink or Pepsi or something. And she would and every time as we went up Rue du Bac, the price would increase. We got to the point where it was like $6.50 for a Diet Coke. And he was like, this place stinks.
Yeah, exactly. No, you have to pay attention. That's actually... See, these price gauges are something I actually use to decide on where I'm going to eat. So if I go look at a menu and I see that their escargot is €16 for 6 escargot, or it's €7 for a Coke, that's not happening. I'm not going here. This is a ripoff, to put it bluntly. Yeah, I have a restaurant I really like that's over by Châtelet, but Châtelet restaurants can be overpriced. And I just looked at their menu the other day when I was back in Paris, and their Coke is now €7. And I was like, well, guess I'm not coming back here.
Wow.
So, it's just a good way to gauge where you should go. And also I would say that like a good glass of wine should be between like 5 and maybe if I'm stretching 10 or €11 for a glass. And that's a normal glass, not what's called a tulipe, which is like a large pour. But for a normal glass, it should be between like 5 and 10 realistically.
Yeah.
Because all the wine you're drinking is typically French, so there's no importation tax and it hasn't had to travel very far to get to you. So it's not very expensive. So it really should be. I've eaten at a Michelin starred restaurant and it literally, I think my glass of wine cost me €6. So really, truly, it doesn't need to be that high.
Yeah. Exactly. You said it all. It's very good. And also, prices have to be posted outside of cafes and restaurants. So if you're price sensitive, just look at the list because by law, it has to be there. And I think that's one that they get slapped on the wrist if they don't. So it has to be very obvious how much they're going to charge. Even the Michelin star restaurants, they post this stuff. They don't make it obvious, but they do post it. They have to.
Yeah, exactly. There's an easy way to gauge what you're about to get into.
So let's talk about the men selling bracelets and Eiffel Tower keychains and stuff like that. I've observed a lot of them when I was writing my Eiffel Tower tour because I kept going back several times a day to the Trocadero that's where my tour starts. And there's a bunch of them right up there. Yeah.
Yes. So it's really common to see people selling trinkets like Eiffel Tower keychains or light up Eiffel Tower little mini statues, or sometimes it's homemade bracelets. This is very common. And the people who do this are typically from another country. Originally, they've immigrated to France and they're trying to, from what I understand, from what I've been told by multiple people, is they're trying to gather as much money as they can to send it back home to their families.
Yeah.
And so, in general, just with human being, I just think, lead with kindness. But, sometimes their salesmanship can be a little aggressive, especially with the bracelet salesman. And you'll find those concentrated at the bottom of the steps of the Sacré-Cœur. If you want to skip them, if you're facing the Sacré-Cœur and you're at the very bottom and you're looking at the famous steps, go to your left about 150 yards, 100 yards. There's another staircase that goes up to the Sacré-Cœur that no tourists go up. And there are no bracelet salesmen there. So if you want to avoid them and you don't need to go up the famous steps, just go to the staircase on the left.
Right. And it's also by the téléphérique.
If you do find yourself the target of their salesmanship, my best suggestion is say no merci in your best French accent. I mean, really just pull out your acting abilities and pretend you are French for a moment and say no merci in your best accent and just keep saying no merci, because what they're going to do is they're going to start asking you questions in English. Where are you from? What are you doing here? Do you like Paris? They're trying to get you to talk to them so they can distract you long enough to put a bracelet on your wrist and then tie it in a way that you can't get it off. And then they'll demand a inordinate amount of money once it's on your wrist and you can't get it off. So it's kind of a scam in a way. So just being careful about that. And if they're asking you questions, do not respond in English, because that kind of only increases the aggressiveness.
Yeah.
So it's just no merci, no merci, no merci, and just keep walking. And if they try to grab your arm, which some of them do, I have had that happen, just rip your arm away, look them direct in the eyes and say no merci. Like, get kind of aggressive about it. They will leave you alone.
Yeah, you have to be there's a point where if they are touching you, it's okay to be unpleasant.
A little rude. Yeah, exactly. I agree. You can't be touching me or grabbing parts of me without me getting rude with you. That's just how that's going to work.
Now, the Eiffel Tower keychain stuff is different because they're not as aggressive.
They let you pass.
Yeah, they let you walk by. And one of them on the Trocadero, he helps tourists set up their shots. So it looks like they're pinching the Eiffel Tower. They're picking it up from the top, And so he helps them set it up. And I've seen several people give him a tip, give him a few coins or whatever. And he's super nice. I mean, I have observed him do this 100 times. And he's very nice. Some people don't give him anything. And he will still, so he'll be like, okay, you do it like this. He will model how to do it. And then he will place them so that it looks right.
That's a smart job.
Come step here, stand over here, and then you over there, you stand over there, and it looks perfect. So, some of them they're just bored. And like you said, they have a hard life, and you don't have to be rude to them because they are really not a problem. The ones that crowd you and they want you to sign a so-called petition, they really annoy me. They really annoy me.
Never sign a petition in Paris. I don't care how much you are sympathetic to that person's plight. Do not sign a petition in Paris. That is a huge scam. What you're going to do is you're going to sign and then they're going to say, okay, give me the money you just signed for.
Yeah.
And they will not take no for an answer. And they very often have a second person nearby who will come up if you refuse.
Yeah.
So if someone asks you to sign a petition, just say absolutely not, like no, and just keep walking. Don't let them pull you in by any means, because unless that person is wearing some official signage, you'll see people who are getting petitions signed for the Red Cross. That's the same. You do see people out canvassing for, a charitable organization, but they usually have some sort of signage on them, an official uniform, something along those lines. The people we're talking about are just random people who have no affiliation to anything. So they don't have any clothing that's affiliated to anything or any sort of signage, and they're just looking to get money from you.
Okay, perhaps we have time for one or two more. Be careful with your things on the metro. Yes, let's talk about that briefly, but it bears repeating that there are pickpockets on the metro. They even have announcements in all languages telling you that there are pickpockets on the metro. So as a French person, if I can, I get on the metro, I go to the opposite door, I put my back against the door, and I have my purse in front of me, crossbody, and my hand on my purse. And it's hard for them to get something out of you like that. But there are tourists who are so careless. I mean, what have you seen? Tell us what you've seen.
Well, it's funny. The typical pickpocket doesn't necessarily exist. I have one kind of typical idea for what a pickpocket looks like, but it's not always accurate. I noticed a group of girls, like probably teenagers, who stole a phone from someone. And they were such a large group that I did not feel comfortable confronting them or saying something because it would not have gone well. But essentially, it can be anybody. So be on the lookout. Don't have your phone out when the doors are about to close. That's a classic time for someone to come and rip it out of your hands and run out right as the doors close. And then that phone is gone. Have your hands on your purse. Don't keep your phone in your back pocket. For the Lord's sake, don't do it.
Yes.
It's a terrible idea. Just don't do it. And just make sure you're protecting your stuff and being aware if you have your passport on you. I always suggest getting one of those backpacks that has like a secret little zipper on the back of the backpack that goes up against your back if you're going to be traveling a lot, just because people can't get to that zipper without being the most talented pickpocket in the world.
Yeah.
And I will say there are some talented people out there when it comes to this business.
Oh, yeah.
My mom was in Paris in the 80s, and she had a circular purse that the zipper went around in a circle. And she had her hand on the purse, and she was sitting on the metro, and she wasn't paying attention, but she had her hand on the purse. And then she looked over, and next to her was a child, and they had unzipped the purse halfway and had their hand inside the purse.
Wow.
And she had not felt a thing. And this was at a time when it wasn't uncommon to see a child pickpocketing. That is not really a thing anymore, but still the safety lesson, still persists. Like, just be very cautious, be very careful. Be paying attention. Don't fall asleep on the metro. Because I see some people fall asleep on the metro and I'm like, how? I don't even understand this.
Also, if you can find pants with zippers, it really helps, because then you can put your phone or your key or whatever, your room key, whatever you need, and you can zip it up, and then it's less likely to be taken. If you are a fluffy person, large people tend to wear oversized clothing. It's really easy to take stuff from oversized clothing. So in that case, really, really zip it up because they will get in there. If you wear tight clothing, you're more likely to feel somebody touching you and removing an item. But of course, the best thing you can do for not being robbed is don't take so much with you. Just empty your wallet, just take one credit card, have your Apple Pay or your Google Pay on your phone set up. You really have to watch your phone. That's really, really important. But at least in that case, you're watching one thing, just the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not so hard to do. most people go to Paris. I've never been pickpocketed in Paris. Someone tried, and I realized it and yelled at him, but they've never managed. Some of these pickpockets are really bad at it. They just try stuff, but some of them are very good. So it just depends who you're dealing with. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, but just be cognizant. Just because you live in the middle of a cornfield, when you get to Paris, you just tell yourself, okay, I'm never in a situation like this, so I need to be alert, And people who live in big cities know this. Even, big cities in America, you have to be careful as well. But in Paris, it's not the guns you have to be worried about. It's the pickpockets, which in the grand scheme of things, it's not so bad. I mean,
it's not so bad. Yeah. Ultimately, you can, if you're really worried about it, most cell phone companies will offer a monthly insurance plan where if you get your phone stolen, they will fully refund you or get you a new phone without much cost. So if you're really worried about it for your time in Europe or in Paris, you can do that. And that's a great way to protect yourself.
You should back up any data that you care about to the cloud so that you don't lose it. And you should set up, all phones today come with solutions like wipe my phone, brick my phone, things like that. So learn how to do that before your trip and set it up. Usually you have to do it from your computer or from another device. So you link your devices and then you say, okay, my iPhone 14 or 13 or whatever was stolen. You right click on it and it will make it unusable. But if you don't do it ahead of time, then too late. You have to set things up like that.
I know we're about to run out of time. There's just one little point that I wanted to point out. Do you mind if I...
No, go right ahead.
So this is going to be probably my biggest tip, especially for American tourists, because they do this a lot. Please do not walk into a restaurant or a bar and immediately ask if they have an English menu in English. This is a quick way to have someone dislike you. You need to say bonjour. You need to say bonjour or bonsoir. You need to greet the person and acknowledge their existence. It is the polite thing to do. How would you feel if you're working at a restaurant in the US and someone walked up to you and said, vous avez un carte? And you would be like, what's going on? I don't understand why you're not even saying hello to me. It's general politeness. Please do not start with, do you have an English menu? It's not nice and it makes us look bad.
No, this is a very good point to make. And saying bonjour anyway, I know it's not so natural to Americans because you don't go around saying hello to people in America all the time. But in France, you have to. You just have to. It's just how we are. Otherwise, people are going to be like, oh my God, this person, another one like that.
Yes, exactly. No, you have to start with bonjour, bonsoir. And that's every interaction that you're going to have, literally.
Try whatever French you have. Just try it on them. Now, don't insist. Don't expect that the whole conversation is going to be in French just because you made an effort. Because they are in a hurry. They won't have time to put up with your slow French. But try.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. And it happens with me all the time.
Yeah, just start in French. And if they switch to English, oh well, it's too bad, so sad. My French still needs working on.
Yes, I've had many people switch to English for me.
Well, and in Paris, people do it to me. I'm native.
Oh my gosh, really?
Okay, so I'm standing in line with somebody who speaks English and we're speaking English. So they hear us speaking English. And then when they start talking to me, I speak French and where do you want to sit? Whatever, we do that in French. And then they switch to English again. And I'm like, no, me.
That happens to my partner and me a lot because he'll let me speak so that I can practice my French. And then they'll switch over to English. And then they'll ask him a question in English and he'll respond in perfect French. And they'll be like, what? I'm confused by you.
What do I do here? 2 languages. Oh no, my head's going to explode. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Erin, it's been lovely talking to you. I am sure people are going to really like this episode because they need to hear this stuff. And do look for Erin Tridle's... Well, what is there a name to your TikTok or is it just...
Nope, it's just under my name, Erin Tridle. So if you type my name into TikTok, it'll come up right away.
Excellent. Do that. If I had TikTok on my phone, which I do not and will not, I would do it, but I can't. So I can't.
No worries.
Time is too precious. Merci beaucoup, Erin.
Merci, Annie.
Au revoir. Again, I want to thank my patrons for giving back and supporting this show. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing that. You can see them at patreon.com/join us, Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes. Thank you all for your support. Some of you have been doing it for a long time. You are wonderful. And a shout out this week to new patrons, Catherine Vaughn and Jeff. I don't know Jeff's last name. So whoever you are, Jeff, thank you. To join this wonderful community of Francophiles who support Join Us in France, please visit patreon.com/join us. And to support Elise, go to patreon.com/Elise Art, ELYSART. This week, I published a reward for patron. It was about line 6 of the Paris Metro, where I help you practice how to say the proper names of all the stops on the line. These are all tricky in French. Proper names are tricky in French. So, patrons who joined today also have access to previously published rewards, and there are a lot of them, including line 1 through 6. But there's also, recipes, updates with Elise, historical tidbits, French practice, of course. So if you love the podcast, you'll love the Patreon rewards. Also, patrons, if you want to tell me something, please send me a message from Patreon instead of sending me an email. I get a lot of emails and I can't respond to all of them. Messages coming from within Patreon always get a response. And thank you also, Martin Rosenberg, for your one-time donation using the green button on any page on Join Us in France that says Tip Your Guide. If you need some help with your itinerary, I can do that for you. I offer 2 levels of service now. The Bonjour service, where we talk for up to a whole hour. You ask me all your questions, I give you my suggestions, and you'll hopefully be ready to make decisions about whatever you were struggling with. You can also go with the VIP service, where we talk also for about an hour, but then I send you a detailed document that outlines everything we discussed, as well as a summary of the best advice shared on this podcast. To get started, purchase the service at joinusinfrance.com/boutique, and you'll get emails guiding you through the process. It's pretty simple. And if you found this podcast too late to book an itinerary session with me, you can still take me along in your pocket with my GPS self-guided tours available on the Voice Map app. You can choose from the Eiffel Tower, which is available in English or French, Ile de la Cité, Le Marais, Montmartre, Saint-Germain-des-Prés, or the Latin Quarter. Just to make the example of the Latin Quarter, that one in particular is so exhaustive that you could spend a whole day letting me take you around. Not that I will talk the whole day, not by a long shot. The tour itself, if you just listen to the audio, it's about 90 minutes. But if you go into all the wonderful places that I lead you to and tell you why you should go in, you'll have a fantastic day in Paris. You can download the tours as soon as you buy them. You can listen at home if you would like. And then when you get to Paris at long last, open Voice Map, go to the appointed start of the tour. And when you get there, I'll start talking. It's unbelievably easy. You can access my tours directly from the Voice Map app if you're in a hurry. But if you purchase the tour codes from joinusinfrance.com/boutique, you'll receive a special listener discount. But it's not immediate. I do sleep. So give me a few hours before you panic that you didn't get your tour codes. All right. How about not getting a ticket when visiting France? First, let me explain why I'm bringing this up again. It comes up a lot. Somebody posted this on the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook. And by the way, if you want to join that, you're welcome to, but you do have to answer questions because this is a group for podcast listeners, not your generic group where we'll answer any question that pop into your head about France, okay? Bonjour, friends. Does anyone know how to fight a speeding ticket? My husband and I are convinced that this is a scam that is pulled on rental car drivers. We got 2 tickets last year and 1 already this year. Cars blow us by. We don't speed. If anything, we drive under the limits because we have no idea where we're going most of the time. Okay. Most people responded, just pay the ticket. But then she came back and said, I'm sure that's what they count on. Just makes me mad when we know we weren't speeding. Ma'am, with all due respect, you were speeding. This is a computer taking your photo speeding. The thing is, you don't realize how low the threshold is for speeding in France. 1 over the speed limit, and you're speeding. Not 5, 10, 1. And if you're not using cruise control, you go over by 1 without having any idea you're doing it. Now, there is a procedure to fight a ticket. And somebody posted a link to it. With good reason, there is a procedure. But you will not win. Because the only people who win those are folks who can prove that they loaned their car to someone else. And even if you can't prove it, that person says, oh, I'm sorry, I was driving that car. I'll get the points taken off my license. It happened to my husband once. Our daughter was driving his car. He could have disputed it, but he didn't because he has 12 points and he didn't care if he lost 1. He made her pay for the ticket, however. So that's the only people who ever win this, okay? If you were in the car and they can prove it, you will pay for the ticket. Now, at one point she said, locals were blowing past us. Yes, of course. Locals know where the speed traps are. And they slow down for those. But you have no idea, even though many of them are pointed out by massive road signs, okay? But you don't know where they are. So, if you're the only people on the road, you get caught. That's how it works. And then you make up some conspiracy against car rentals. Look, a lot of people who rent cars never get a ticket. That's because they don't speed, not even by 1. You can set a speed limiter on most modern cars. And it'll complain at you if you go over even by 1. And you can also, of course, set the cruise control to not let you go over. So there's things you can do. It is not a conspiracy. Fighting it is just a waste of time. So don't speed, okay? Not anywhere. Now, if you see people increasing their speed, then probably they know there's no speed trap there. But there are speed traps in a lot of places, and French people get caught all the time because there's also many movable radars, okay? They're not always in the same spot. And the ones that are always in the same spot get pointed out by a road sign anyway. So, but there's others as well. So just don't go over the speed limit at any point while driving a car in France. And thank you very much. My thanks to podcast editors Anne and Christian Kodovan, who do a wonderful job with the transcripts and producing the audio file. You should search the website for show notes about specific parts of France that you want to go to. It's an excellent resource. Next week on the podcast, an episode about Jewish heritage in France. This is a topic I have wanted to tackle with Elise for a long time. And here we are. It's going to be out next week, and I'll be very happy to hear what you think about that topic. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2023 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.